Why are these book boyfriends setting the bar way too high?
Because they're fictional and emotionally available.
We're two Latina besties chismeando over the latest romance read on Book Size Matters podcast.
Talking drama, tropes, and all the juicy stuff in between.
Whether you're a romance junkie or just want the tea without flipping a page, we read it so you don't have to.
This is Book Size Matters, hosted by Edith Martinez and Angel Robles.
Available wherever you listen to podcasts. Big books, bigger opinions.
Join me, Danny Trejo, in Nocturnal, Tales from the Shadows. An anthology of modern-day horror stories inspired by the legends and lore of Latin America. Listen to Nocturnal, Tales from the Shadows on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We saw them again on the road. 2 hours later, it was impossible. But there they were again, this time walking along the shoulder in our direction. They don't look like a ghost. They look too real. But it couldn't be possible. The same one. Again. Like a glitch in time. Good evening, my dear community. I hope to find you well and in the best spirits to listen to the following horror stories and encounters with the supernatural world. Take advantage and marathon this or any program that makes you feel that warmth of being with family, listening to stories. Let's go now with the first one of this evening. There's no more time to waste. Close your eyes if you can and let yourself be carried away by the following anecdotes, because you are now entering the world of Tales of the Night. Good evening, Uriel and the entire Tales of the Night community. I would like to tell you one of those many stories that my mom told me in childhood, and with which she entertained us at night. In the year 1994, unfortunately, my uncle, my mother's brother, passed away from a brain tumor. For the funeral services, they hired a wake room inside a garden cemetery in the state of Mexico. The wake proceeded very peacefully, although of course with the great pain that such a loss entails. And by dawn, as in many wake rooms, there was a schedule for staying with the deceased, and that was the case here. Even so, an agreement was reached with the person in charge, and he allowed my mom, who was about 23 years old at the time, to stay accompanying my uncle. Her cousin of the same age and her adoptive parents, plus the night watchman. My mom and her cousin were not aware of the agreement to stay all night. They assumed it was open all through the early morning, as happens in other places. For hours they were chatting and occasionally praying so as not to fall asleep. Around 3 a.m, her parents had already fallen asleep on one of the sofas, and only they remained awake when a lady about 65 years old entered. The lady took a seat and very kindly asked them about their deceased. My mom and her cousin responded, chatting, a normal conversation. They were like that for about 15 minutes, talking about life and death, about those who leave and those who stay. Then the lady got up from the chair where she had been sitting with her feet toward the casket. She dedicated an Our Father and 3 Hail Marys for my uncle's rest. She stood up and told them that she was in the room next door, keeping company with her deceased, that she had gone out for some air. And since she saw that there were also people in that room, that's why she came over. Then she said goodbye with a smile and left. Some time passed, and my mother and her cousin thought about returning the courtesy and accompanying them for a moment as well. They left their room and headed to the one next door. Upon entering, they found no one. They thought that perhaps they had gone out, as the lady said, to get some air. The coffin in that room was closed, with no images or photographs, so they only dedicated a prayer and returned. The next morning, they remembered that during the conversation, the lady had mentioned to them that they would be leaving earlier, heading to the garden cemetery. They decided to go say hello to her before her deceased left. When they walked to the other room, they were just leaving at that moment but they didn't see the lady from the early morning anywhere. The surprise was that as the casket was leaving, the mourners were carrying a photograph about 50 centimeters in size, and the person in that photo was the lady who had been with them in the early morning. They told this to their parents, and that's when they were told about the arrangement to stay the night, and that really there should be no one next door but the deceased. They never saw or heard the lady who entered at any time. That is my story. Thank you very much for reading it. Greetings to the entire community, and hopefully we will continue to grow much more. Thank you for listening to me. The purpose of this email is to share a message for everyone through the experience that my grandmother lived. Today, August 20th, marks 3 years since her departure. I would like to share this with you because the few people I have told, with all good intentions, seem to doubt it and don't take it into account. I believe that here, in this community, there are those who do believe. More than anything, I do it to preserve that memory. Her words, her feelings. My grandmother lived a very difficult and somewhat sad life. At the end of her days, she suffered a lot, but now she rests in peace with God. She always said that before, things of God and things of evil manifested themselves more explicitly because people weren't as corrupted as they are today. That's why both miracles and paranormal events make themselves present. We are from the state of Mexico, from a community called Santa Cruz de Bravo. My grandmother was orphaned of her father since childhood and was in the care of her aunts and her maternal grandmother. After living years of mistreatment at the hands of her uncles and aunts, she grew up with those wounds in her soul, very present. She always said that if she had had her father with her, she would never have lived like that. That perhaps she would have had the opportunity to go to school, perhaps a different life. One of the saddest things that happened to her was losing her little sister. She said she was very pretty, that she looked like a little doll, but she died after a severe pain in her leg at 9 years old. My grandmother remembered that event with great pain. You could see in her that feeling of abandonment and loneliness that marked her life forever. Over time, she went to work in Mexico City with one of her aunts as a domestic employee in a big house. One would think she would have better opportunities, but being a humble girl without education, her stay in that place was also surrounded by mistreatment and humiliation. One Christmas, while other families celebrated, while girls her age received nice gifts, she received as a gift from her employer a bar of soap so she could bathe. She said, and that filled her with sadness and anger. She accepted it politely, but upon reaching her room she burst into tears, complaining to her father for having left her alone, for not being there to defend her. So, between tears and rage, she fell asleep. Suddenly she felt a strange cold. She noticed that the window was open, although she hadn't touched it. She sat up in bed and saw him. In front of her was a man with a terrifying appearance. His flesh was falling off in pieces, and on his arms and legs you could see the bones. She wanted to scream but couldn't. She only heard these words that she never forgot. "What do you want from me? Why do you call me every night? Don't you realize that your complaints don't let me rest in peace? Look, my body has no rest. Every complaint, every word of yours calling me, hurts me. It hurts me." Everything fell silent today, and as if it had only been mist, that man disappeared. My grandmother began to cry, but not out of fear, but out of calm. She told us that at least she had been able to see her dad, that she had confirmed that he hadn't forgotten her, and from that day on she stopped crying for him. But that wasn't the only experience, community. After her sister's death, she cried a lot for her, missing her, even asking her to take her with her. One night after falling asleep crying, she dreamed, or at least thought it was a dream, about her little sister. She appeared to her as pretty as always and told her, "Sister, don't cry for me anymore. Don't cry, because every time you suffer for me, I do too." Her little sister lifted her dress, showing her legs full of wounds. "See this? You do this to me every time you cry for me." My grandmother, in her dreams, asked for forgiveness. She promised she wouldn't cry again. The next morning, upon waking, she saw that the mat where she slept had small mud footprints, even though it wasn't rainy season. She shared these experiences with me and my sister one day when a friend of mine had passed away, and I was crying a lot. She told me, "Daughter, let the dead rest. Don't cry for them, because that doesn't let them rest in peace. When I die, I don't want you to cry for me after burying me. God gives us life to be together, and when He calls us, only the good and bad things we have done remain." She wiped my tears and gave us that teaching that I will always remember. I hope that even though it's not as terrifying a story as the others told here, this experience can help those who are going through a difficult time, so they know they are not alone. That little by little we must let go of the pain. We never know what there is after death, nor the consequences that our suffering may have for those who have already departed. I hope you can read me. Thank you for everything. My name is Franco Coyote, and I want to share with you a story that, well, is a bit complex in how it develops, but I'm going to try. My grandfather used to tell my cousins and me when we were little that his first children, my dad and his brother, used to wake up at dawn and play with a boy in the living room of the house where they lived, here in Mexico City. My grandmother never quite believed them when they told her they woke up, and, on the contrary, she always scolded them, telling them that what they were doing was like playing with the devil. But all that disbelief changed one night when she arrived very late from work. She worked as cleaning staff at the pediatric hospital of Coyoacán, and that day she had to cover for a co-worker who couldn't attend due to personal problems. So my grandmother arrived around 2:30 or 3 in the morning and found my dad and his brother sitting on the floor playing with a black boy, but not a black-skinned boy. Something different. Everything about him seemed to be made of coal. His skin, his clothes, his eyes. She told us it was a boy who seemed to swallow the little light that came from the bathroom. He was like an empty, living shadow. She screamed and ordered him to leave the house because you are not welcome, warning him that if he didn't, the white girl was going to protect them. And it's because she knew he wasn't a child, that he was something using that mask to deceive them. And she shouted that at him. That boy stood up and ran out the front door, passing centimeters from her. He never came into the house again. That happened about 37 years ago. My story begins 20 years ago when I was 7. Back then, when my grandmother told us what had happened to my dad and my uncle, I didn't believe her. I thought they were just stories to make us go to sleep early, but she insisted it wasn't to scare us, but to warn us. Although he no longer came into the house, she said that that dark entity continued to inhabit there, in the vecindad, and that it usually appeared after midnight. I remember well one of those early mornings when gatherings go on and in the middle of the night comes that different hunger, the one you have to hold off sleep. It was when they sent me for some food and soda to the store at that hour, to a store that closed at 3 in the morning. Despite my age, I wasn't afraid to go out because almost all my family lived in that neighborhood and also in the adjoining one. The store was just a few steps away. I went to buy, and when I returned, under the stairs that led to the 2 floors of the buildings, I saw a boy crouched among some bicycles and a planter belonging to my uncle. It seemed he was stuck there. I approached and suddenly he stood up abruptly. He pointed at the soda I was carrying and asked me with an innocent voice, "Truth?" It was then that I saw him well. He was black. He was a totally black shadow, the same color I had imagined so many times when my grandmother told that story. I ran to my house with the boy's laughter following me, scared. I told my grandmother. She scolded my dad and my uncles for sending me out on the street at that hour, knowing that they themselves had been protagonists of the original story. They, better than anyone, knew they weren't tales, that that boy existed and was still there appearing. And well, my dear community, I remembered all this because recently one of my cousins, the youngest I have at 7 years old, came to my grandmother's house telling that he had seen the same entity. This was just a few months ago, but it happened earlier. around 9 at night, when he was returning from his mom's house to my grandmother's vecindad. Like a good modern child, he was carrying a cell phone and was playing with it. As he passed by the same stairs where I had my encounter, he heard a boy talking to him. "Will you let me play?" My innocent cousin answered yes, but when he extended the phone to him, he noticed that that boy had no face, that he didn't come out of the darkness, as if he couldn't do it, as if he could only exist in it. He ran to my grandmother's house to tell about it. She, who has always had faith in cleansings, did one with an egg, but couldn't finish because the egg burst just upon touching him. The yolk came out dark with an unpleasant smell and stains. Since then, it hasn't happened again. My cousin was the last to see him, and since he's no longer the youngest in the family, we just hope that the smallest one doesn't have to meet that entity so well. That it seems to always appear to the children in the family who are around 7 years old. My father was that age when he saw him for the first time. My uncle was about to turn 7. I don't know about you, but I doubt it's a coincidence. Hello, my name is Jimena. I'm from Querétaro. I haven't been listening to the podcast for long. They recommended it to me, and when I saw it for the first time, I felt it was the perfect place to tell what happened to me. I've always considered myself a very rational person. I don't get scared easily, but I can't stop thinking about what has been happening to me, especially one night in particular. The worst thing is that, like many who come here, I know that if I told my family or friends, they wouldn't believe me. They simply don't believe in these things, and I'm afraid they'll think I'm crazy. I've lived in this apartment for more than 3 years, and nothing had ever happened to me until a few weeks ago. I was alone around midnight, finishing some things on the computer. Everything was quiet until I heard a noise, a soft dragging like bare feet on the floor. Something coming from the hallway. I thought it was noises from the building, but the strange thing was that the sound stopped every time I stopped typing, as if trying to advance only when I made noise. I stayed still, typing just to type, paying attention to the sound. And then I heard the dragging approach slowly, until it was only a few steps behind me in the dining room. My heart was beating very hard. I got up carefully to turn on the dining room light. Suddenly, as I was walking toward the switch, a dry knock shook the table as if someone had put both hands down hard. I froze with the feeling that I shouldn't turn on the light. Have you ever felt so much fear that you'd rather not see? I paid attention. I thought I heard a low, regular breathing near me, almost like laughter. A laugh that had trouble breathing. I don't know how I reacted, but I ran toward the door. There was a lock that only opens with a key from inside and outside. I didn't have the keys at hand nor the desire to start looking in the darkness. That's where I knew I wasn't alone. I tried to keep control, at least pretend it, and I went to bed. But obviously I didn't sleep. I spent the night trying to convince myself it was my tiredness, that everything was from overworking, stress, overwork, lack of sleep, that it was just that and nothing more. And that same morning, when I was almost convincing myself, I noticed something when I got up, something in the house. Footprints, as if someone had walked barefoot with wet feet. They were already dry, but they were very clear footprints that went from the door to the table, right where I heard the knock. Footprints that no longer moved from there. The following days I started to notice strange things. A couple of times I found the TV on with no volume, the bed unmade when I was sure I had left it well made. And on one occasion the shower was wet, even though I hadn't used it. Small details, but too specific, too real to ignore them. And the worst happened a few days later. I woke up at 3 because I heard my computer keyboard. Keys pressing one by one. I got up trembling, and when I got close enough to turn on the light, the sound stopped. I didn't see anything strange, but I had the impression that the chair had just moved, as if someone had just gotten up from there. I decided to ignore it. I decided to try to continue as if nothing happened. The only way I knew how to do it. Working, concentrating on my work. But the next afternoon, while I was working, I got up as always for coffee. I came back and finally finished something I was working on in a text file. As I reviewed it before sending it, I noticed something. A sentence written in the middle of the work, with no connection to anything else. A sentence that was written there, without spaces. A sentence that I swear I don't remember writing. Thank you for letting me in. I don't know how long I stared. I ended up closing the file. I didn't even save it, wasting a lot of work. I turned off the computer, scared to death. Since then, I keep looking for another apartment. But here I remain. It's not easy to move with a small budget. A few weeks have passed and nothing else has happened. But I'm not declaring victory. I don't trust that this is over. My name is Tammy, and I'm from Guatemala. For a while I wanted to share one of my experiences with you, but I hadn't been encouraged to do it. My house is in Guatemala City, and I've lived there all my life. The story begins one night when I was approximately 10 years old. Back then I slept in the same room as my sister, who was 17. Each of us had our own bed, but I always woke up in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep, and I would go sleep with her. Because since I was little I have the feeling that something is watching me, as if at any moment something was going to happen, or I was going to see something. It's not always, it's specific moments, but that night was one of those. I felt strange and decided to get up to lie down with my sister. Her bed was against the wall that had a window, and at the foot was the door of the room that led to the hallway. From that bed you could see the stairs that led to the second level. Under them was the pila, or pileta, I don't know what you call it in other countries, and next to it the bathroom. I don't know if I'm making myself understood. We keep the room door open because we had a little cat named Marilu and she liked to go out at night. I was about to fall asleep when I noticed a noise. I don't know when it started, but it was as if someone was washing clothes in the pila. At first I didn't find it strange because sometimes my mom washed at dawn since water came to the house at that hour. But after a while I started to think, why would she be washing in complete darkness? I sat up to observe from the bed, but I couldn't distinguish anything. You couldn't see absolutely anything. Everything was dark. And that was strange because in my hallway we had transparent sheeting through which the light from the moon or the street always entered. But not that night. It was then that I understood that what was there was not my mom. I was about to speak to her thinking that maybe it was her, but I didn't. I began to wake my sister trying not to make noise so that thing wouldn't hear me. But my sister was a very heavy sleeper, and she wouldn't wake up until I squeezed her hard, and she finally opened her eyes. I asked her not to make noise and to listen. I asked her if she also heard how they were washing clothes and she said yes. Then I told her, "The light is off. You can't see anything. That's not my mom." At that instant, the noise stopped. I reacted quickly and asked my sister to close the door with the lock. She didn't hesitate and did it immediately. But meanwhile, footsteps began to be heard. Footsteps approaching directly toward us. Luckily, my sister managed to close just when the footsteps were in front of the door. My sister's fear was noticeable. She hugged me tight. Minutes later, the footsteps continued, still moving away from our door and heading toward the kitchen that was right next to our room. The worst thing was that as it passed in front of our window, I could see a shadow despite the darkness. I distinguished how that thing crossed and entered the kitchen. Suddenly, pots and plates began to be heard falling as if someone was throwing them at us with force. The noise was horrible. I was very scared, but everything stopped abruptly. Just like that, out of nowhere. I started praying in a low voice until I fell asleep. I don't know if my sister did too. The next morning, as soon as I became conscious, I got up quickly and went to the kitchen to see the mess. But there was nothing. Everything was in its place, as if nothing had happened. I went with my sister, and we told my mom what happened. She told us she hadn't heard anything, but she told us that in that house, they had always heard how they washed clothes in the pila. She even remembered that it also happened to her when she was little, but she assured that what she experienced was much worse. Someday I'll convince her to tell me. In this house, it has always been like this. Things are seen and heard, but I'm already used to living with whatever is inhabiting there. I've heard many peculiar things on this channel, but I've never heard of a ghost that washes clothes. Have you? Thank you for continuing here, community, for having reached almost the end of this episode. Thank you for sharing this program, for commenting on it, for giving us your opinion on today's stories. All those opinions help us a lot. They feed us a lot, and also make the episode do better, that it reaches all our subscribers. For now, it's time to continue. We still have one more story left this evening. Hello, community. I prefer to keep my name private. I just want someone to hear this, and if they can, tell me what it was I saw. I was 14 years old when it happened. I live in Colombia, in a small town in the department of Cesar. At that time, I lived alone with my dad. My father has a friend from high school, Natalie, who lived in Barranquilla. She had just had her first baby, and my dad said it was a good time to go visit her. I'm not very excited about babies, but Holy Week was coming. I had no classes, and the truth is, I like road trips. So I accepted. We left on a Friday after lunch in that black Chevrolet that my dad won in a raffle at work. At first, everything was fine. Like any trip, music, window down, and that road heat that makes you drowsy at times. After about an hour, we stopped at a gas station with a store. We didn't need gas, so my dad parked on the side so as not to be in the way. We went in for snacks. The store was small, with few windows. There were my dad and I, a man changing expired products, another man who didn't even turn to look at us, and the clerk, a distracted guy who was marking things in a notebook, and you had to speak to him twice for him to respond. Suddenly, a horn started honking outside, long and insistent. No one paid attention at first, but it didn't stop. I told my dad that maybe he had parked wrong. He looked out. Our car was fine. The noise was coming from a gray truck stopped on the road without approaching the pumps. Simply stopped there. My dad frowned. He went out to see what they wanted, and as soon as he crossed the door, the truck started and left, just like that, without more. We got back in the car and continued. My dad said it must be some idler wanting to call attention and nothing more, and we soon forgot about it. About 40 minutes later, someone suddenly crossed the road. My dad managed to brake, not out of danger, but out of surprise. It was a man about 30 years old. Gray jacket, dark jeans, very white skin and black hair. The strange thing wasn't how he looked, but how he walked. He advanced giving like jerks. He would speed up and slow down within his own step, without stopping completely, as if suddenly walking in fast motion and then in slow motion. The posture was also strange, neck and head forward, forearms flexed and hands hanging. He crossed from one end to the other and disappeared into the undergrowth. He wasn't carrying a backpack. We were far from any town. He had no reason to be there. My dad muttered something about a drug addict. I laughed and told him he couldn't call everyone a drug addict. But, community, 2 hours later, the same subject appeared on the road again. The same one. This time he wasn't crossing. He was walking along the shoulder in the opposite direction to us. We passed by his side, slowly. My dad looked at me and asked, "It's not the same one, right?" But I told him yes. Even though it was impossible, there were no stopped cars nearby, nor anyone who could have given him a ride. And yet, there he was, with that strange and poorly calibrated step. We wanted to find an explanation and we couldn't find one. So we simply continued. And then a heavy sleepiness came over me. Strange, as if they had put a blanket over me. I almost never sleep on the road. I wanted to recline the seat, and that's when I noticed that my dad was also nodding off. I hit his thigh and yelled at him to wake him up. We advanced a few more kilometers and he finally pulled over. He said he needed 20 minutes, nothing more. I begged him not to stop. I had a horrible, visceral feeling, I told him we were almost there, that he should better continue. He responded with something sensible, that he preferred to lose 20 minutes than to crash. My dad was going to turn off the engine when suddenly I realized he wasn't looking at me, but at something behind me. I turned toward the window and there he was, once again, the same man. This time walking normally, not with that jerky step. He was just looking at the ground as if searching for something and whistling 2 short whistles and 1 long one. Over and over, 2 short and 1 long. He didn't look up. He didn't seem interested in us. He just passed by our side along the shoulder of the road, with that whistling pattern that froze me, that left me pinned to the seat. My dad whispered something I'm not going to repeat, and I just managed to yell at him to leave. It took him a couple of seconds, as if he was verifying if what we were seeing was real. And finally he started the car. We didn't talk again the whole way. In Barranquilla, with Natalie, my dad told her about the horn, about the man appearing over and over, about the sleep that knocked us out suddenly. She was more worried about the sleep. That's how many people die, falling asleep at the wheel, she said. We asked her if there had been recent accidents on that road. She said she hadn't heard anything. She prayed with us, reluctantly scolded my dad, and we stayed quiet for a while. Like when you don't know if what you experienced was something strange, or something from another plane, from another place, from another reality. On the way back, we didn't see anything, nothing remotely suspicious. I thought for a time that we had imagined it, but I can't find a way that we both imagined exactly the same thing 3 times at different points, with that damn whistle exactly the same. I'm not going to say that was a ghost. I didn't feel it ethereal. It looked physical, dense, flesh and bone, but it appeared where it shouldn't, as if walking outside our time. It didn't look at us. I never saw its face well. What remained in my memory were only its jacket, its way of walking, and that rhythm of 2 short whistles and 1 long one. We continue to use this road because there's no other way to get to Valledupar or Barranquilla, but since then we think twice or even 3 times before leaving. And when sleepiness comes to me on the road, I remember first the horn, the man passing by my side without seeing me, and that whistle that I can't get out of my head.